Time to go to work, baby. Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask that you hit the like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
So, pretty please, with sugar on top. Clean the fucking car.
Something that I don't get to talk about much on this channel are my musical influences, which were just as impactful on me as a person as my movie influences were. A lot of people don't know this, but I actually grew up listening to Elvis music.
No shit.
I did so through various family members who shared their love of him and his music with me, and thus I've gained an appreciation for him over the years. So needless to say, I was looking forward to seeing how they were going to bring this larger-than-life pop culture icon to the big screen. And I knew that wouldn't necessarily be an easy task for anyone. Elvis has been long overdue for an adaptation like this. The last time it was even attempted is, I believe, the John Carpenter and Kurt Russell miniseries from 1979.
Besides that, it's on the reflexes.
I'm actually a big fan of music biopics, especially when they're done properly, with Walk the Line and Bohemian Rhapsody and Straight Outta Compton being some of my favorites. These biopics are at their best when they capture the moment in time that these artists were at their peak. In a lot of ways, that's just as important as properly portraying the artists themselves. And I have to be honest, I am very impressed with how Baz Luhrmann handled this story.
Get the fuck out of here! No, I cannot, it's serious!
One of the things I was very interested to see was how they addressed the cultural impact of Elvis. I don't know how many of you know this, but there's always been this controversy that surrounds him, as it pertains to some people taking issue and saying that he stole from black artists. And I have to say that whole issue was handled in this movie in a way that would have to put that stigma to rest. They very clearly show how much love, respect, and admiration Elvis had for the people who came before him. People such as B.B. King and Fats Domino. He was simply heavily influenced by his surroundings and where he grew up at, like all of us. And he fully embraced the music, the fashion, and the culture that deeply spoke to him. And I can identify with that, being a kid who grew up liking hip-hop.
That makes sense.
There's also a great deal of time in this movie showing how some people initially resisted the concept of Elvis introducing black culture into the mainstream. To me, this was one of the most fascinating aspects of this movie. Baz Luhrmann himself is actually known for kind of injecting modern music into these period pieces, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, in my opinion. But in this case, Baz using hip-hop in certain instances actually worked really well, because there are parallels to be drawn in how people viewed early rock and roll in the same way that they viewed early hip-hop.
If the crack don't get you, then the hookers will.
Next, I want to talk about Austin Butler, who I was a bit skeptical about playing Elvis, especially after seeing the trailer. But let me just say, now that I've actually seen his work in its entirety, I think he nailed the role. To me, this is such a powerhouse performance by him. He nailed everything from the dialogue to the mannerisms, and made it feel like he fully embraced this role. He could have very easily resorted to a cringe Elvis impersonation like we've seen so many times before, but instead I think he embodied the legend more than anything. And the movie does give you a good sense of who Elvis was as a person, outside of being an entertainer. So much so that I gotta be honest, the ending of this movie actually hit me harder than I expected it to.
Why do you cry?
To see a young guy who just loves music, and he loves to perform, but he's kind of being twisted and contorted in a way by his own fame, as well as the people around him, it's very tragic. We've seen movies cover this concept before, of fame having a price, but this one just hit a little bit different for me when you consider his humble beginnings and how much he had to offer as a musician, and just the fact of how big he was and how his downfall impacted society as a whole.
Is it just me, or is it getting crazier out there?
And that's another thing I wanted to bring up, because they very clearly show how his music impacted society on a greater level, and in different time periods for that matter. In a lot of ways, he ended up being the person that people needed in that time. His music helped bring people together when they needed it most. I thought the music, or the use of music in this, was obviously very well done. I did notice they used some newer renditions of classic Elvis music, which I thought sounded really good.
I like it a lot.
There's an emotional core to the movie that mostly deals with Elvis's dedication to his family, but of course nothing really compares to the love that he gets from the audience when he performs. I was actually really inspired watching this movie, and I just was not expecting that. And the fact that I went through this large range of emotions while watching it tells me that Baz Luhrmann did his job. That being said, there are some things that didn't exactly work for me. I understand that Baz has his own unique style as a director, and it sometimes makes scenes in his movie come off a bit chaotic or hectic. And there's a little bit of that going on here, specifically in the beginning of the film. And as a result, Elvis's rise to fame felt a bit glossed over. It just felt like there was much more of an emphasis placed on the end of his career rather than the beginning. Why? I mean, I get it, the movie is already 2 hours and 30 minutes or so. So I understand some things probably had to be cut out, but maybe we can get a director's cut someday or something when it comes out on physical media. The other issue I have, and it's the only real big issue, is Tom Hanks as Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager. Everything from the weird prosthetics used to create him, all the way to the actual performance, just felt really off to me.
What the hell am I looking at? When does this happen in the movie?
This story of Elvis is actually told through his eyes, which I didn't really know going in, which unfortunately places a lot of emphasis on his character in the film from time to time. And yes, it comes off as a bit too much emphasis on him. You could have still had him in the movie as the rightful villain of this story, without taking time away from why we bought our ticket to begin with, and that's to see Elvis's story. This is one aspect of the film that I would have altered drastically if I was in the director's chair. Overall though, I thoroughly enjoyed Elvis. It's one of my favorite movie-going experiences of this year. I can definitely see this movie being a crowd pleaser for people who are looking to be taken back to that time. I think it does the legend of Elvis justice, and that's why I'm going to give it the Pleased Palpatine.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Elvis has left the building.